Next up, it is my pleasure to introduce Ericsson Cairo.
Since I'm the only one walking up, I'll take all the applause. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming. We are Team Cairo, consisting of Christoph, Jay, Rohan, and myself, Maciej. Now, although we are very eager and excited to share ideas with you, we felt it would be best to start with some real experts talking about the needs that exist in the world today. Please enjoy.
That's kind of an obvious statement up there. I started with that sentence about 12 years ago, and I started in the context of developing countries. But you're sitting here from every corner of the world, so if you think of a map of your country, I think you realize that for every country on earth, you could draw little circles to say these are places where good teachers won't go. I got an interesting phone call once from Colombo, from the late Arthur C. Clarke, who said, I want to see what's going on. And he couldn't travel, so I went over there. He said two interesting things. A teacher that can be replaced by a machine should be. The second thing he said was that if children have interest, then education happens.
We have to go from what is essentially an industrial model of education, a manufacturing model, which is based on linearity and conformity and batching people. We have to move to a model that is based more on principles of agriculture. We have to recognize that human flourishing is not a mechanical process, it's an organic process. And you cannot predict the outcome of human development. All you can do is, like a farmer, is create the conditions under which they will begin to flourish. So when we look at reforming education and transforming it, it isn't like cloning a system. There are great models like this, it's a great system. There are many great models. It's about customizing to your circumstances and personalizing education to people who you're actually teaching. And doing that, I think, is the answer to the future, because it's not about scaling a new solution. It's about creating a movement in education in which people develop their own solutions, but with external support based on a personalized curriculum.
Now, as we just saw, educational gaps exist all over the world, and we feel that technology, and specifically Ericsson, are in a very good position to address these needs. I'll walk you through the agenda, and I'll give you a brief overview of what we recommend, which is for Ericsson to develop what we call the education technology platform, both internally within Ericsson and externally entering into the emerging markets, mainly the education sector. After which we'll follow up with be able to answer any questions you may have. What we recommend is actually a two-pronged approach, where Ericsson education technology platform is employed internally to better align the workforce of the true talents and skill level of Ericsson's employees with the company's needs, creating higher efficiency, better productivity, and more engaged workforce. And we feel that this would result in $6.6 billion increase in enterprise value by the year 2022. The second prong would be the bottom-up approach in emerging markets such as India and Africa, rolling out this platform in the education sector, allowing students that may not have access to devices, content, and connectivity to be able to further their education through Ericsson technology. We feel that this would generate $830 million of cumulative revenue by the year 2015. Now I'll hand it over to Rohan, who'll do an excellent job of explaining this further.
Thank you, Maciej. So Maciej explained to you about taking the Ericsson education technology platform into developing markets. But let me give you an overview of what the developing markets look like, what is the education system there look like. So as you can see here, I've taken India as well as the United States in comparison, just to put things in perspective. India has about 75% literacy rate, but if you look at the number of people who graduate from high school, it's about 7%. It's unfortunate, and there are a couple of reasons behind that. Some of them being the lack of infrastructure, the lack of resources. When I say resources, it could be lack of teachers coming up with good lesson plans, which has good quality content. So things like that are present in these markets, which present some challenges to the education sector, basically the primary education sector or the K-12 as we know it. To deal with these challenges, there is an opportunity for ICT to be used to deliver content, to deliver connectivity, and this is somewhere where Ericsson can play to its strengths. So when I say ICT and how it can be used, the challenges are there is a lack of well-trained teachers. This means they're not able to come up with good lessons and good content to deliver to the children. This does not keep them well engaged, and that is one of the reasons why children may lose interest in school. The other thing is connectivity and the lack of infrastructure and the remote geographic locations. Ericsson can provide a solution based on low-cost tablets as well as cloud-hosted backend solutions. This can be delivered over the mobile broadband, which Ericsson is very capable of enabling. It has a lot of experience in that area. So as you see in bridging the gaps or bridging the challenges in education sector for developing economy, there is a great business opportunity. When I talk about business opportunity, there's definitely money involved, and even here there's a lot of money involved. NGOs and governments in every country want the education sector to boom. It wants the children of that country to progress really fast. That's why they're spending a lot of money. They're taking in a lot of effort to put in resources into these things. There is a global ICT spending budget of about $126 billion. This is a huge market. If you take India, there's about $250 million just for the next year in the 2011-2012 budget, which was approved. So there's clearly a market where Ericsson can enter, play to its strengths of enabling technology and further education. So how do we do that? We're going to propose the Ericsson education technology platform, which will be the enabler for this kind of solution. My friend Jay will talk more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan. The Ericsson educational technology platform is a system. But it's more than just a system. We like to think of it as a solution. And we'd like to think of it as a solution for two reasons. One, it finally bridges the gap between what education technology promises to deliver and finally to deliver it to the lowest parts of our global economy. It's also a solution because we wrapped it up in a way which will allow our third-party providers, both networks as well as integrators, to go out there and talk to their clients in a way to deliver a comprehensive solution for the education market. We did that with two partnerships that are absolutely critical and missing from the Ericsson portfolio that we'll be able to fill with partnerships. One is a low-cost device, typically a tablet, that will have the mobile capabilities and long-term use without needing to recharge. We've identified a couple of potential device manufacturers, but in particular there's one in India that we think might be of great use as they've already started to work with the Indian government to distribute an Android tablet. The second is the content. We got to make sure we have the right content to engage with the children as well as with the educators and make it easy for them to use. All of this combined together is the enterprise platform system with Ericsson in the middle, providing the linkage between the end devices, mobile broadband, and and the cloud backend solutions through the content sources. Last but not least is obviously educators themselves can utilize this resource to put back their information that they've gathered over the years and help those in third world and emerging markets. Now, there's obviously going to have some kind of revenue involved with this in order for Ericsson to consider this a viable opportunity. And here's the overall revenue that we see happening over the next 4 years for Ericsson through the ETP. This is a combined revenue over the next 4 years and in present value terms. As you can see, it's going to generate over $620.8 million for Ericsson. Of that amount, $353.9 million is coming from the platforms. And that makes sense. If you think about most recently the iPhone, when they first came out, it was a platform that provided most of the revenues for that particular company before content became a real revenue-generating engine. And by 2016, we believe similar types of network dynamics will come into effect for Ericsson as content with all of the connectivity that Ericsson provides with mobile payment solutions as well as content distribution capabilities, and that will become the biggest area of revenue generation going forward. And will provide an ongoing revenue stream, which I'm sure you guys wouldn't mind. With such a big market, you're going to have competitors, and we've identified 4 major ones that we want to make sure that we address. One is IBM, which is also a cooperative company with Ericsson. But where IBM lacks is really the device knowledge, because they got rid of their device company, Lenovo, many years ago. Whereas Ericsson still maintains that relationship with the networks and understands the end devices, particularly in the emerging markets. The other 3 competitors are all software-based companies and don't really understand the emerging market networks the way that Ericsson does, and doesn't have the necessary infrastructure to have the device and individual user knowledge that Ericsson does as well. So we believe that Ericsson is really well positioned at this point to take advantage of a big and growing marketplace. What I'd like to do next is to talk a little bit about the implementation process. And within the implementation process, there's 3 parts that up at the very top that are going to be absolutely critical for rolling this out. Ericsson does have Telcordia today, which provides some of the functionalities needed to roll out the ETP. However, there are certain things that are specific to the education market that it does not have, in particular the back-end solutions to plug into some of the educational softwares in the cloud today, as well as the administration components for the educators. The other 2 main components, as I mentioned earlier, are the device manufacturers and the content. We have to identify those right away. But once we do that, we believe we'll be able to roll out an initial pilot in India where they've already started to create these devices for the education market by the second half of 2012, before fully launching it across Africa as well as the rest of India in 2013. Last but not least is the risks. We have to address this. And we've identified 3 main ones that we think are going to be the most critical for Ericsson to understand and mitigate. Of these 3, the biggest one we believe is the government. And as we all know, it takes a little while to work with them. Because of that, we want to identify other potential buyers initially for the rollout so that we can start the network effects of others understanding the value and build in real-world trials that will allow us to go to the governments and sell it more quickly. So several NGOs that will be able to do that. So all in all, we believe the education market through the ETP is a substantial opportunity in the emerging markets. Next, we want to talk a bit more about how this plays in the business world, and to do that, I'll introduce Christoph.
Thank you, Jay. So Jay and Rohan just described how our solution is going to fill the platform full of content and relevant skills-related knowledge. I'm going to come at it from a top-down approach on how companies like Ericsson will be able to utilize that knowledge to improve their internal operations. There's going to be some comparisons because organizations, companies are very similar to academic organizations. They both evolved to be very siloed institutions with a lack of communication between different departments, and in particular, a vast gap between educational organizations and the companies themselves. Our solution drops a knowledge cloud on top of both of these siloed organizations, improves communication internally, and bridges that gap so that for the first time they will truly be networked. And we're very excited to see what will happen when communication expands at this level. Now, the platform, from the company's perspective, will be fairly similar to that the individual users and students would utilize. However, it will be a more robust solution with additional search capabilities and with greater concerns for privacy and general robustness. When a company signs up and starts utilizing the education technology platform, its first task will be to organize all of its human capital and put it into the platform. For instance, it would survey all of the relevant subject matter that it touches in a network node organization. Then at each of those nodes, break down the relevant skills and educational backgrounds that would be required for that specific task. This would range from high-level strategic tasks down to very low-level technical proficiencies. As a little example, so you can better understand this, we've created a job posting for a director of business development in India who would help Jay and Rohan implement their task. You'll notice that the highest scores come in the industry proficiency area, which will be highly critical. You'll want somebody with great telecommunications background and experience dealing with the Indian government to launch this project. Second to that, you would want somebody with strong management skills, because this is predominantly a task of coordinating between a very broad range of individuals. Next, you'd want to try to find somebody with that leadership potential and strategic vision, because a director role is really a feeder into higher level executive positions. On the other end of this platform, once the HR department fills all of this information of every individual and employee and future position into the database, they'll want to start pulling information from the network and aligning it with the various roles and responsibilities within the company. It'll exist under a similar manner, the network node solution with a hierarchy of information underneath it. At the top of that hierarchy, you'll have strategic insights, and at the bottom, technical proficiencies yet again. Once an employee identifies that there's a position in the company that they would like, they would be able to log into this portal and identify what skills and abilities they'll need to develop to be trained and qualified for the position that they want. The system would track that activity the same way that it would track their career advancement. It would also track all of their involvement on projects within the organization and feed it into the education technology platform. The system would then take that information and learn and grow and become stronger. First and foremost, we see significant advancements in search capabilities specific to skill and education-related knowledge. In addition, Ericsson would be well positioned to develop an improved project management tool that leverages this entire network of information, both in terms of individual skill advancement as well as performance on the job. We also see this product as having very high-level implications, and we'd like to believe that one day the data that it collects could help international educational organizations steer their curriculum as they identify the needs of organizations and can better articulate what that curriculum is to the content providers. Now I'm going to describe the implementation very quickly. It's very similar to what was described previously with a little bit of a modification. And that is that for the business level product, you want additional iterative product development to ensure that the final launch is robust and satisfies all of the needs of the end users. And in addition, we've put in a much larger buffer for the educational process to ensure that the users who take up this software are very well prepared to implement it and implement it properly from the beginning. Now, the overall benefits of this product, I think, are pretty obvious. You'll have a better educated, a better engaged, and a more productive workforce that will feed all of those advantages up to their employers, who will experience improved revenue growth and significant improvements to operational expenditure and efficiency. On a larger scale, in a network society, we will all see these benefits with the democratization of information creating equity throughout the world. Now, touching on the financials briefly, this is a conservative model that we created to show how we're getting to that $6.6 billion of enterprise value. And we think that that's going to occur through converting minimal increments of additional SG&A expense into significant cost of goods sold reductions. There are also some risks. First and foremost, cost overruns. We think that the iterative process is going to solve that. And secondarily, that Ericsson will need to reach out to its strategic partner network to bring in knowledge. We've incorporated that into our plan, and we think that by creating the proper partnerships, we'll be able to flesh out the back end of this network in particular. Now, in summary, our proposal, the education technology platform, is a twofold approach. First, okay, thank you. We'll now open it up for questions.
Can you go back 2 slides and talk about the revenue model a little bit more? I mean, it's hard to ignore that $6.6 billion US dollars.
Sure.
Take a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so the model starts back in time at the beginning of the last 11K and goes through that little dip. We then made predictions of where the company should be going based on its recovery rate, kind of flattening out once you've recovered from the immediate dip in the recession. The yellow line you'll see is the Ebitda for status quo, business as usual, not adopting this proposal plan. And the light blue line up at the top is your revenue. The way that this model works is that starting very shortly, you would begin working on the software development and implementation of our proposal. This model is specific to the second component, the business-oriented component of the platform. And you see that the Ebitda is dropping as expenses go up without any new revenues coming in. Then around 5 years from now, when traction starts to occur and you've switched over, your organization learns and adjusts to the new platform, you'll start to see those operational gains and efficiencies, which creates a nice shift up in the curve. Then there will be a little momentary plateau before revenues start coming in from new sources. We tried to be very conservative, not predicting that the revenues would go through the roof or that new opportunities would just magically appear. So it's basically just the operational efficiencies that are causing the Ebitda curve to jump up above the yellow line. And it is not until 2019 or so that we factored in that new revenue streams would come in through selling this technology to strategic partners and other businesses so that they can also experience the efficiency gains of utilizing this platform.
Okay. How many employees are there in this assumption?
It starts off with just one office,
Yeah.
testing and experimenting, and we did not switch over to a full launch until 2015.
Till 2015. So 100,000 employees covered by 2015.
The launch begins in 2015.
Oh, launch begins in 2015.
Yeah.
Okay.
We appreciate that it will take a while to go through this whole process.
Okay. So if ETP, if we gave you guys money to go build ETP, and you were able to help Ericsson realize this incremental value, how much do you think Ericsson would be willing to pay you as a company?
Well, if we're able to negotiate a solid share of the enterprise value that we think that we're creating, a significant amount.
That's what I'm asking. You know,
I'm not committed to business school, so we can talk about this.
Yeah. So the point is, if there is so much incremental value that can be generated inside the enterprise, why bother about that left side leading with primary school, etc.? We could just go after this corporate environment, help Geraldo achieve all this stuff, and then we just spin you off into a separate company, and it would be interesting to see how much you can extract out of this 6.6 billion.
Well, we think that we can generate revenue and value for the company by either approach, but that together, by combining the bottom-up approach that seeds the platform with knowledge and education, and the top-down approach that integrates that with employers' needs, you really experience the maximum value. And it's not just when Ericsson switches over to the system, but that when the entire world switches over, that we're going to see
I'm interested. We can just go run this business instead of Ericsson. This starts to sound very interesting.
We've tried to make our models on both ends as conservative as possible to show that each one independently is a solid business case, and that together we expect even larger revenues, but as is always the case in network solutions, you never know how big it's going to get or how quickly. So we've tried not to jump into that too far.
All right.
Real quickly to also answer that, part of the value of having the educational side of the equation is that we believe it'll be easier for us to get content and educational LMSs to join our system if we have that component as part of it, instead of just for business purposes.
All right.
Is when we talk about sort of taking this out into other businesses, you mentioned 2019. Is that when you envision that it would be possible to bring other corporates on board?
Well, we're seeing other corporations coming in shortly after the global launch within Ericsson. So 2015, 16,
Okay.
17. We didn't start putting revenues into the system from those relationships until 2017 to be
Okay.
conservative, to ensure that Ericsson is in fact very happy with this and receiving the sort of results that they would like to see.
What I'm thinking about is just if we play with the thought that this will happen in corporates in general, which is an assumption, I mean, how much time would we have before someone else would do it and we would be too slow?
Well, there are other companies trying to get into the space. Human capital management systems are very hot. The problem is that nobody else has Ericsson's degree of contact to the networks. So you're not going to have an integrated solution that considers both personal advancement and project management or facilitation. So we think that Ericsson's specifically and particularly situated to create a successful solution that will experience all of the synergies that are possible with this approach.
But still, even if you can make something that is better than what others can make, if someone else makes something that's good enough before, that tilts the equation anyway. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
I'm just trying to figure out some of the competitors you see. I mean, even the non-traditional in these areas. Could just think out loud, like LinkedIn be a competitor in this space, or LinkedIn, or?
Absolutely. There are other people who are trying to tackle individual segments of this. Is that me? Oh. There are other companies that are tackling the resume and career monitoring. There are companies that are pursuing the academic component, and there are other companies that provide great project management services. But nobody is able to provide this holistic service because they don't have all of the touch points necessary to implement it. LinkedIn would be a great partner. We've put them up there to provide an API that people are familiar with. There are other companies, Khan Academy, that's providing content that we feel is an absolute integral partner in this process. And you're not going to be able to do it alone. We've identified many strategic partnerships to help provide this robust solution that will enable other companies to bridge the gap that they can't any other way.
Question on Blackboard. Blackboard has a platform today that is built for collaboration, good recognition in the educational space, etc., right? But you didn't rate them very highly. If you go to slide number 11. Why is that?
The main thing about Blackboard, and the reason why we determined that they weren't necessarily going to compete as heavily in the emerging markets in particular, is because of their focus in the developed and particularly the secondary educational markets. What we're trying to go after is a very market that they have not been as successful with. And what we believe is the case is that we want to partner with certain companies such as Newton or perhaps Pearson, who has a much more robust content source for the lower primary educational curriculums. And particularly Newton we found to be quite interesting because what they provide is a machine learning curriculum that actually adjusts the course depending on the person's capabilities and aptitude. And so we believe having those type of solutions plugged into the system will allow, from a content perspective, to compete well with a company like Blackboard. But Blackboard is only one single application layer, whereas Ericsson is able to provide some of the monetization capabilities through the system that you have, whereas Blackboard may not be able to do that because they're not synced in with some of the networks around the world.
Okay. One other question. Why is this fascination with all these developing markets? Why not just go after an affluent market where you don't have to battle for a low-cost device, where there's plenty of money in the system, and why don't you try to build a business there?
So the reason why we started going after developing markets is because there is a lot of expansion in terms of telecommunication infrastructure. There's a direct need in terms of the lowest level of children needing access to these kind of technologies, and there's funding coming from NGOs and governments. This is not really present here. we'll have to fund a paid or premium service model, which may or may not be adopted in view of competitors like Blackboard or Pearson and people like that. So when there is an opportunity in a market which is not currently being addressed, we can go in there, develop the system, make this solution really mature. And once that's done, we can of course offer that platform to anyone in the world. And it need not be a low-cost tablet, it can be on an iPad.
So you think it's easier to go build the business in an environment that is funded by NGOs where you're driven by a low-cost tablet?
It may not necessarily be easy to get funding from governments, but NGOs we see are definitely driving this revolution. They want to achieve their objectives of delivering their own corporate or their own responsibilities. And since they're driving out this model in a market where the telecom sector is also expanding, it ties in very easily over there.
One question maybe, because when I was listening on the education side, I thought, why not Apple? They could be doing that, and they don't need to go to NGOs, right? They have a lot of money.
You're right, Apple could do that, and they probably have the cash if they wanted to subsidize the iPad to do that type of work. Where we believe that Apple won't necessarily go to that market is because of their branding position. And in particular, we don't believe that Apple is wanting to try to get into this particular marketplace with a premium product and perhaps dilute some of the brand recognition of the iPad. When it comes to the actual devices themselves, Ericsson does not purvey the product, the devices. We would be working with the third-party manufacturer to get the devices, and so in that situation, there's a win-win-win situation for everybody involved. The other component about Apple, we believe, is that they don't necessarily have all of the knowledge base when it comes to the emerging markets. And even in places like India, their products are typically sold at a very high premium level. And because of that, there is a perception of, we believe that, of Apple being for a certain type of consumer in these markets. And we believe that there is a better opportunity to undercut some of the things that Apple has done in order to serve the market that's really needing this type of technology. And the fact of the matter is, there's been a need for this for a long, long time. And it's just that the costs haven't been there to justify going in. And with the cloud solution, mobile broadband, and low-cost devices, we're finally able to do something like this.
So you would put Apple as a competitor in slide number 11?
Yes, we would consider them a competitor, but given some of the other companies that we thought were more involved with the education space, we kept them out just to make sure we highlight the ones that we thought were particularly could cause some trouble.
You also have Google there, and you put a cross mark against, X mark against low-cost device for Google. Why? If there is anybody who could provide a low-cost device, it would be an Android-based tablet.
Google. So why we do not consider Google as a strong positioned player is because they have a platform and they have the cloud-based solution, but something which they do not have is the entire solution which they can go and deliver through the network operators to these places. I mean, if you consider a market like India or Africa, Google trying to deliver a complete solution wherein they facilitate the device, the content, the application developer, all these things does not fall very well inside the capacities of Google, and it does more with Ericsson.
Just to jump off that point a little bit as well is that in the platform space today in particular, given what Apple has done, payment processing and making that as easy as possible is a huge component of making an ecosystem work. And Google does not have that today. They have it sort of in the States, and they're trying to roll it out across the world. But you guys actually provide the back-end solutions for a lot of that payment technology. So I think it might be easier for you guys to roll that out in a much more scalable basis.
Do you have any more questions? Okay.